The Competing Values Framework, in short the CVF model, was developed by the Professors of Management and Organizations Robert Quinn and Kim Cameron, both from the University of Michigan. The review of the model is based on the book Diagnosing and Changing Organizational Culture based on the Competing Values Framework, 3rd edition, published in 2011. The model can help you diagnose and initiate change in your organizational culture. To determine where your organization is located in the CVF model right now, and where in the future, we use a tool called Organisational Culture Assessment Instrument, for short called OCAI. Before we can use the OCAI tool, we need to have the CVF model in place. The Competing Values Framework gives a classification of 4 corporate cultures and indicates how a company operates, how employees collaborate, and what the corporate values are. Let us now review the construction of the model. The CVF model consists of 2 dimensions, one placed vertically and the other placed horizontally in the model. The vertical dimension differentiates between organizations at the top that emphasize flexibility, discretion, and dynamism, and organizations at the bottom that emphasize stability, order, and control. Organizations at the top are viewed as effective if they are changing, adaptable, and organic. Neither the product mix nor the organizational form stays in place very long at firms such as Google or Nike, for example. Organizations at the bottom are viewed as effective if they are stable, predictable, and mechanistic, as are most universities, government agencies, and conglomerates such as Boeing or VW, which are characterized by longevity and staying power in both design and outputs. The horizontal dimension differentiates between organizations that emphasize an internal orientation, integration and unity, and organizations that emphasize an external orientation, differentiation and rivalry. Some organizations are viewed as effective if they have harmonious internal characteristics. IBM has traditionally been recognized for a consistent IBM way. Other organizations are judged to be effective if they are focused on interacting or competing with others outside their boundaries. For example, Toyota and Honda are known for thinking globally but acting locally. Together, these 2 dimensions form 4 quadrants. These are the hierarchy culture, the market culture, the clan culture, the adhocracy culture. Each of the 4 cultures is reviewed in the following sections. The hierarchy culture in the bottom left quadrant is characterized by a controlling environment. The hierarchy culture is characterized by a formalized and structured workplace. Procedures and controls govern what people do. Effective leaders are good coordinators, organizers, and monitors. Maintaining a smoothly running organization is important. The long-term concerns of the organization are stability, predictability, and efficiency. Formal rules and policies hold the organization together. Success is defined in clear lines of decision-making authority, control functions, and accountability mechanisms. Examples of organizations are fast food restaurants such as McDonald's, or a government agency that is responsible for controls in airports. In both organizations, there are strict guidelines for every small detail. The market culture, in the bottom right quadrant, is characterized by a competing environment. The market culture is a result-oriented workplace. The basic assumptions in the market culture are that the external environment is hostile rather than benign, consumers are selective and interested in value, leaders are hard-driving producers, and competitors who are tough and demanding. The major task of management is to drive the organization towards productivity, results, and profits. The glue that holds the organization together is an emphasis on winning. Success is defined in terms of market share and penetration. Examples of organizations are IKEA, a worldwide furniture chain, or Walmart, a retail chain. The goal is to outpace the competition and be market leaders. The clan culture in the upper left quadrant is characterized by a collaborating environment. The clan culture is typified by a friendly place to work, where people share a lot of themselves. It is like an extended family. Leaders are thought of as mentors, facilitators, team builders, and perhaps even parent figures. The organization is held together by loyalty and tradition. Commitment is high. The organization emphasizes the long-term benefit of individual development, with high cohesion and morale being important. Success is defined in terms of internal climate and concern for people. The organization places a premium on teamwork, participation, and consensus. Examples of organizations are small family-owned companies and some NGOs, like Doctors Without Borders, or the free online encyclopedia, Wikipedia. The Adhocracy culture in the upper right quadrant is characterized by a creative environment. The Adhocracy culture is a dynamic, entrepreneurial and creative place to work. People stick their necks out and take risks. Effective leadership is visionary, innovative and risk-oriented. The glue that holds the organization together is a commitment to experimentation and innovation. The emphasis is on being at the leading edge of new knowledge, products and services. Readiness for change and meeting new challenges is essential. The organization's long-term emphasis is on rapid growth and acquiring new resources. Success means producing unique and original products and services. Examples of organizations are startups, most of which are entrepreneurial ventures. We have now reviewed the individual quadrants. We are now going to review the relationship between the four quadrants. Each of the four sides of the model highlights a core value that is the opposite of the value on the opposite side of the model. Flexibility versus stability. Internal versus external. The dimensions, therefore, produce quadrants that are also contradictory or competing on the diagonal. The clan in the upper left quadrant identifies values that emphasize an internal, organic focus. In contrast, the market in the lower right quadrant identifies values that emphasize an external, control focus. Similarly, the adhocracy in the upper right quadrant identifies values that emphasize an external, organic focus, whereas the hierarchy in the lower left quadrant emphasizes internal, control values. The competing or opposite values in each quadrant give rise to the name for the model, the Competing Values Framework. Most organizations develop a dominant cultural style. The Competing Values Framework serves as a way to diagnose and initiate change in the culture that organizations develop as they progress through their life cycles. Because the culture of most organizations is invisible and taken for granted, most organization members have a difficult time identifying or describing it, let alone consciously changing it. This is where the organisational culture assessment instrument can be especially useful. For using the tool in practice, go to the link below. Now, we are going to present a short introduction to the Organisational Culture Assessment Test, for short called OCAI. The test consists of two parts. In both parts of the test, you must distribute 100 points on the 4 cultures that are in the model. The first part of the test shows where your culture is placed right now, and the second part of the test shows where you prefer the organisation to be placed in the future. When you want to change your organisation's culture, you have to ask yourselves the following 3 questions in each of the 4 cultures. What should we do more of? What should we start? What should we stop? There is no such thing as a standard best or right culture. Many different factors determine whether an organisation has the right culture at the right time. Here are 2 examples of organisations that usually have different cultural profiles. The first is a high-tech manufacturer. They have to develop new technology all the time. The dominant culture is Adhocracy. The second is a government agency. They need to have their procedures and rules in place. There must be no mistakes. The dominant culture is hierarchy. The 2 cultures are different, but probably right for the individual organisation. Both can change over time. Now, let's take a look at Apple's culture change from 1980 to 2000 and a little beyond. Steve Jobs and Stephen Wozniak invented the first personal computer and started the Apple company. At first, Apple's culture was dominated by a single entrepreneurial, charismatic leader, Steve Jobs, who was setting direction, and the company was flexible and freewheeling. The people hired were young, dynamic, unconstrained California folks who prided themselves on being free of policy manuals and rulebooks. The press described the group as renegades and crazies. The cultural profile involved a high degree of emphasis in the Adhocracy quadrant, moderate scores in the clan quadrant, and a low score in the hierarchy and market quadrants. Apple's culture was dominated by an entrepreneurial, innovative, adhocratic culture and placed in the upper right quadrant. The second culture profile emerged within a few years. Apple established one of the most successful ventures ever experienced in the industry, the formation of a group of pirates. This small group of Apple computer pirates designed and developed the revolutionary Macintosh computer. The team's endeavours were so successful that the entire organisation adopted the team culture. Employees wore Apple logos on their clothes, had Apple bumper stickers on their cars, and spoke warmly of the Apple family. Apple came to be a highly cohesive clan. Apple's culture was dominated by a clan and an adhocratic culture and placed in the upper left and right quadrants. The enormous success of the Apple company led it towards the third kind of culture, however. With hundreds of thousands of computers being sold, distribution channels expanding worldwide, and the emergence of a large array of highly competitive rivals, the freewheeling clan faced a need for controls and standard procedures. Policies and regulations were needed. In other words, a hierarchy orientation culture had to be developed and placed in the bottom left quadrant. The founder and CEO, Steve Jobs, was the quintessential innovator and team leader, perfectly comfortable in an organisation dominated by adhocracy and clan cultures. He was not an efficiency expert and administrator, however, and not inclined to manage a hierarchy culture. John Scully was hired to manage the shift to stability and control. The new set of values and priorities reflected in the new culture made Jobs' orientation out of sync with current demands. The founder, Steve Jobs, was fired from the company. The dominant competencies preferred in the third culture profile by John Scully are in the diagonal quadrant opposite from the first culture profile managed by Steve Jobs. In short, Steve Jobs, as an adhocracy leader, was a rule breaker, whereas John Scully, as a hierarchy leader, was a rule enforcer. Steve Jobs had to lose the battle if the company was to grow. The fourth culture profile emerged when Apple developed into a large, mature organization under Scully. It ceased to be the agile, innovative company that had characterized the young group of renegades in its early life. Instead, it was an outstanding example of efficiency and marketing savvy. The organization became more of a manufacturing company than a techno company. Apple's culture was dominated by a hierarchy and market culture, and placed in the bottom left and right quadrants. The fifth cultural profile took longer to emerge. Over time, companies tend to gravitate towards an emphasis on the hierarchy and market culture types. The lower quadrants tend to remain dominant the longest. It takes a great deal of effort and leadership to make the change to a clan or adhocracy culture. That was one of the reasons that Apple had performance difficulties in the late 1990s. They were stuck in the bottom two cultures and had a hard time inventing new products. Apple had to rehire Steve Jobs to bolster its largely abandoned adhocracy culture. Steve Jobs did not abolish the hierarchy and market culture. Instead, he reinstituted clan and adhocracy-like attributes so that Apple became a more balanced organization. The organization developed the capability to shift emphases between the four different cultures when demands of the competitive environment required it. They adopted the three questions: what should we do more of, stop, or start? Let us now consider a critique of the model. You have to find out for yourself where you are in the model and towards what culture you want to work. There is no help along the way in the model that says whether you have chosen the right direction. When talking about culture in this theory, it always deals with organizational culture. National or religious cultures are not taken into account. The theory has not included the time and resource aspect. We do not know how long a culture change will take, or whether all changes are equally extensive. The good thing about the model is that it continually forces you to focus on whether your organization has the right culture concerning the goals that your organization wants to achieve in the future.